I still remember the sound, that sharp metallic snap that cut through the warm Saturday air like a knife. 1 second, my father was smiling at the neighborhood kids as he watered the small patch of grass he'd so proudly kept alive. The next, he was lying on the concrete, one leg brace twisted under him, the other ripped clean off and dangling from HOA Karen's furious grip. For a moment, the world went silent. Even the sprinklers seemed to stop mid-spray. My father, this proud, gentle man who hadn't raised his voice at anyone in years, was gasping, his hands shaking as he tried to reach for the brace that once gave him balance. His skin scraped against the driveway, leaving faint streaks of blood that would haunt me for weeks. Karen stood over him like she'd just accomplished something noble. Her voice, cold and righteous, echoed down the street. "You're violating HOA Code 3B. Medical equipment can't be visible from the road." She waved the metal brace like a trophy, her sunglasses reflecting the neighbors who'd gathered on their porches. Some looked away. Some whispered. No one stepped forward. I dropped the grocery bags from my hands and ran to him. "Dad, don't move, please." His face was pale, his breath shallow. I could see the pain in his eyes. But worse than that was the humiliation. He looked up at me, trembling, and whispered, "She didn't have to do that. I was just standing here." The rage that filled my chest burned hotter than the summer sun. I turned toward Karen, my voice shaking. "What's wrong with you?" "He's disabled. You could've," but she cut me off, waving her phone. "I warned you all before. HOA regulations apply to everyone. If he can't follow the rules, maybe he shouldn't live here." That sentence, that cruel, merciless sentence, I wanted to scream, to grab that brace out of her hand and show her what real strength looked like, but my father's trembling hand on my arm stopped me. "Don't," he whispered. "She's not worth it." He didn't know then that those words would become the start of something far bigger, something that would tear through our peaceful neighborhood, expose secrets we never saw coming, and make Karen face a truth she could never escape. Because that day, none of us knew what my father had once done for her family. That was the day everything changed. Before everything fell apart, our life in Willow Creek Estates was simple, quiet, even peaceful. My father used to call it our little corner of heaven. He'd sit on the porch every morning, a cup of black coffee in his hands, sunlight glinting off the silver frame of his leg braces, watching the world wake up. To most neighbors, he was just Mr. Carter, the quiet veteran in Lot 43. But to me, he was the strongest man I'd ever known. He'd been a firefighter before his injury, the kind of man who'd run into burning buildings when everyone else was running out. I grew up hearing his stories, the rescues, the danger, the lives he'd saved. He never bragged about it, though. He'd always say, "I just did my job, son." Nothing heroic about helping someone who needs it. Then one night, nearly 15 years ago, a roof collapsed during a house fire. He pushed 2 people out of the way before it came down on him. The impact crushed his legs beyond repair. Since then, those braces had been part of him, a silent reminder of both his pain and his purpose. He learned to walk again, step by step, with steel wrapped around his knees and sheer willpower holding him up. When we moved to Willow Creek, we thought we'd finally found peace. A small, gated neighborhood just outside Phoenix, filled with perfect lawns, pastel mailboxes, and smiling faces that didn't seem real. My father loved it because it felt safe. "Good folks here," he'd said. I wasn't so sure. The houses looked too perfect, the rules too strict, and the smiles too forced. But he insisted, "Son, after all the noise and fire, I just want quiet." For a while, we got it. He'd spend his mornings tending the front yard, making sure the grass never grew an inch too long. The HOA had a reputation for being tough, but Dad believed in following the rules. He even memorized their entire handbook just to be sure. He didn't want trouble. He never did. That's when she moved in, Karen Monroe, the self-appointed queen of the HOA. She came with crisp white blouses, perfect blonde curls, and a clipboard that never left her side. From the start, there was something unsettling about the way she watched people. Not friendly, calculating, like she was always searching for someone to blame. Her first words to us weren't even a hello. They were a warning. Mr. Carter, I hope you filed the proper exterior modification paperwork for that ramp. My father smiled politely. It's just a temporary access ramp for my braces, ma'am. I still requires approval, she interrupted. We have standards here. We don't want this place looking institutional. I remember the look in his eyes that day. Embarrassment, pain. But he nodded and thanked her anyway. That was who he was, calm, respectful, never one to start a fight. Weeks passed. Karen sent written notices for small things. The height of our mailbox, the color of our porch light, even the sound of our wind chime. My father would just sigh and make the changes. Not worth the argument, he'd tell me. But I could see how it ate at him, little by little. The man who'd faced fire was now being burned by rules and paperwork. Yet through it all, he stayed kind. He'd greet Karen every morning with a nod and a good day, ma'am. Sometimes I think that kindness, that quiet dignity, is what made her hate him even more. People like her can't stand those they can't intimidate. Looking back now, I realize the signs were all there. The sideways glances, the whispers at HOA meetings, the way Karen's friends avoided us during community events. It was like they were waiting for us to slip up for one small mistake they could twist into a violation. But we didn't know. We couldn't have known that beneath the perfectly painted fences and trimmed hedges of Willow Creek Estates, something ugly was festering, something that would soon turn our peaceful life into a nightmare. Because in places like that, order isn't just a rule, it's a weapon. And Karen Monroe? She was about to use it on us. The first real clash came on a windy Thursday afternoon, one of those Arizona days where the sky looks painted blue and the air carries the scent of dust and dry grass. My father had just come back from physical therapy. His gait was slow that day, each step deliberate, the metal braces clicking softly against the concrete. He was exhausted, but determined to finish trimming the hedges by the driveway before sunset. I remember standing by the porch, watching him hum to himself, when the silver Lexus rolled up, polished so bright it reflected the whole neighborhood in its doors. And there she was, Karen Monroe, stepping out with her ever-present clipboard and that tight, judgmental smile. Her sunglasses were perched on her head, and her lips were pressed so thin they almost disappeared. "Good afternoon, Mr. Carter," she said, her tone laced with that fake cheerfulness that always comes before something unpleasant. "I've received some concerns from the neighborhood about the appearance of your front yard modifications." My father wiped the sweat from his brow. "Afternoon, Ms. Monroe. I'm just maintaining the hedge line, trying to keep things tidy." Karen tilted her head, scribbling something on her clipboard. "Yes, well, it's not about the hedge, it's about that." She pointed at the small ramp by our porch, the same one she'd complained about before. "It hasn't been approved by the architectural committee. You know our standards, Mr. Carter. Consistency is what keeps this community beautiful." My father gave a soft chuckle, not in mockery, just patience. "I understand, ma'am, but it's a medical necessity. My braces make stairs tricky some days." I submitted the paperwork, but I guess I haven't heard back yet. Her smile vanished. "Until it's approved, it's in violation. I'll have to issue a formal notice. I'm sure you don't want to rack up any fines." Something in her tone changed, that quiet, poisonous confidence of someone who enjoys having power over others. She didn't care about consistency. She cared about control. I stepped forward. "It's a ramp, not a party tent. He needs it to walk." Karen's eyes flicked toward me. "Cold. Sharp. And you are?" "His son," I said flatly. "Well," she said, her pen scratching on the clipboard, "perhaps you can remind your father that rules are what keep chaos away. We all have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the community." My father's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed calm. "I've made plenty of sacrifices in my life, Ms. Monroe. I just hoped I'd earn the right to walk into my own home." For the first time, Karen's face faltered, just for a second, like she didn't expect him to push back. But then she straightened. "I'll expect the ramp removed by Monday. Otherwise, the HOA will take further action." She turned and left, heels clicking down the driveway. The Lexus door slammed, and she drove off without another word. I stood there, fists clenched, watching the taillights vanish. Dad, we can't let her keep doing this. She's targeting you. He didn't answer right away. He just looked down at the ramp, that simple piece of wood and metal that had given him a little freedom, and sighed. People like her thrive on conflict, son. The best way to win is not to play. But I could see it in his eyes, the quiet hurt, the frustration he tried to hide. That night, he spent hours reading the HOA handbook again, cross-referencing clauses and codes, like he could somehow logic his way into mercy. Over the next week, we started getting notes, little slips of paper tucked into our mailbox or taped to our door. Ramp still unapproved, violation pending. Visible medical equipment against community aesthetic policy. Consider relocating your vehicle. Handicap tags attract unwanted attention. Each one signed with a neat looping K, M. The final straw came when we woke up to find a bright orange notice of noncompliance sign staked in our yard for everyone to see. It was humiliation on display, Karen's way of marking us as the neighborhood's problem family. That morning, my father sat silently on the porch, staring at that sign. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. I could see the weight in his shoulders, the shame in his eyes. And somewhere deep inside me, something shifted. The same quiet that once felt peaceful now felt suffocating. Like the whole neighborhood was holding its breath, waiting for the next blow. We thought that was the worst it could get. But it wasn't. Karen was just getting started. If I had known how far Karen Monroe would go, I would have fought harder from the start. But back then, I still believed that reason could calm a storm. My father did too. He thought if he followed every rule, filed every form, and stayed polite, the HOA would eventually leave us alone. He didn't understand that Karen wasn't enforcing order, she was feeding off control. The next few weeks were like living under constant surveillance. We'd catch glimpses of her car creeping by our house late at night, headlights off, camera phone raised through the window. If the porch light was left on, too long, violation. If our trash bins weren't rolled back within the hour, warning. Even the color of our front door became an issue. Neutral tones, only Mr. Carter. Gray is not beige. Each letter came signed, sealed, and smugly stamped with the HOA logo. But it wasn't just the paper notices anymore. Karen had begun whispering, and whispers in a neighborhood like Willow Creek traveled faster than wind. At community meetings, I'd feel the eyes on us. Conversations would go quiet when we entered. Someone even muttered once, "That's the family causing all the trouble." Trouble. That's what they called a disabled man trying to walk into his own home. One morning, I found my father kneeling by the ramp with a wrench, trying to remove it himself. His hands trembled, his face pale, with exhaustion. "Dad, stop. You don't have to." He didn't look up. "Maybe if I take it down, she'll leave us alone. But you need it. I'll manage. I always have." It broke me to watch him say that. A man who'd once run into burning houses was now scared of a woman with a clipboard. By the following weekend, Karen escalated again. The HOA had organized a community beautification day, a public event where neighbors competed for best lawn and most aesthetic home. My father, still believing in goodwill, decided to participate. He spent hours trimming hedges, repainting the porch rail, even planting marigolds by the mailbox. It was his way of saying, "I belong here too." When the judges came by, Karen led the group, smiling sweetly for the cameras. She walked right up to our porch, heels clicking on the ramp my father had carefully reinstalled after a medical note from his therapist. "Oh, dear," she said loudly, enough for everyone to hear. "I see the ramp's still here. Didn't we discuss removing this eyesore?" Laughter. Low, nervous, awkward laughter from a crowd. My father froze. "It's medically approved," he said gently, holding up the letter. "You can see the documentation right here." Karen didn't even look. "I'm sure you think it's approved, but the board hasn't received anything official. Until then, I'll have to deduct points for noncompliance." "Such a shame, Mr. Carter. You were doing so well." I stepped forward, voice trembling with anger. "You can't humiliate him like this." "Oh, I'm not humiliating anyone," she said, flashing a plastic smile at the crowd. "I'm maintaining standards. But the look on my father's face told a different story. He stood there, gripping his walker, surrounded by people pretending not to see him break. His lips quivered, but he said nothing. He just nodded, turned away, and went inside. That night, he didn't eat dinner. He just sat in the dark living room, staring out the window. I could see the faint reflection of the braces glinting in the streetlight, symbols of everything he'd survived, now turned into targets. A few days later, things took an even uglier turn. Someone spray-painted "Rule Breaker" in red across our mailbox. The next morning, a few neighbors walked by, saw it, and instead of helping, they crossed the street. Karen's Lexus slowed down as she passed, her window rolled halfway down. "Maybe now you'll take the rules seriously," she said softly and drove off. That was the moment I realized we weren't dealing with an overzealous rule enforcer anymore. This was personal. But what Karen didn't know was that she'd pushed too far. She hadn't just humiliated a disabled man. She'd awakened something in me. Because the night I scrubbed that red paint off our mailbox, I made myself a promise, one I whispered into the dark, with my hands still shaking in the scent of spray, paint burning my nose. "You'll regret every second of this, Karen. You'll wish you'd left him alone." And the day I kept that promise was closer than either of us realized. It happened on a Sunday morning, the kind of day that looks peaceful on the surface but feels tense underneath. The sky was cloudless, cicadas buzzed in the heat, and my father was determined to attend the community picnic organized by the HOA. He said he wanted to show face, to prove he wasn't the troublemaker Karen made him out to be. I tried to convince him not to go. "Dad, she's going to twist something again. Just stay home." He shook his head, fastening his leg braces with slow, deliberate clicks. "If I stop living because of her, then she wins. And I've never quit a fight that mattered." He looked strong that morning, clean-shaven, wearing his favorite faded blue shirt, the one with the faint scorch mark near the cuff from his firefighter days. But beneath his calm, I sensed fatigue. He'd been walking more than he should have lately, trying to look normal, and every step cost him pain. The park was already crowded when we arrived. Children ran between picnic tables, laughter echoing through the air, while parents mingled under the shade of the big oak trees. The HOA banner hung proudly above the grill station, building community through standards. Even reading it made my stomach turn. And there she was, Karen Monroe, standing at the registration table like a queen surveying her court. White linen dress, big sun hat, sunglasses, and that clipboard again. She saw us and smiled, the kind of smile that never reaches the eyes. "Well, look who decided to join us," she said sweetly, loud enough for nearby families to hear. "I'm glad to see you're still mobile, Mr. Carter." My father nodded politely. "Good morning, Ms. Monroe." He tried to roll the cooler toward a shady spot near the benches, but one of the brace hinges snagged slightly on the uneven sidewalk. He stumbled just for a second, and I stepped in to steady him. But Karen's voice cut through the air like a whip. "Excuse me, sir. That contraption is a tripping hazard. You can't bring that here." People turned to look. Conversations died mid-sentence. My father straightened, embarrassed. "It's my brace, ma'am. It helps me walk." Karen's lips curled. "Well, maybe you should stay seated then. We can't have anyone getting hurt because of your equipment." A few people shifted uncomfortably. Someone whispered, "That's not right." But no one said it loud enough to matter. My father's voice was soft, measured. "Ms. Monroe, I've served this country, and I've followed every one of your rules. Please let me have this day." She stepped closer. "Too close. Rules aren't personal, Mr. Carter. They're for the good of the neighborhood." Then, before I could react, she reached down, and with one sharp, careless tug, ripped the side strap of his brace loose. The metallic snap echoed. My father's leg buckled instantly. He fell sideways, his hand catching the picnic table on the way down. Plates clattered, kids gasped, and a mother screamed. I froze for a second, then everything inside me ignited. I ran to him, heart pounding, kneeling beside his trembling body. "Dad, don't move." Karen's face went pale, not with guilt, but with panic. I didn't mean he was in the way. The crowd swelled. Phones came out. Someone yelled, "Call 911." My father's breathing was shallow, his knuckles white as he gripped my arm. He looked up at me, eyes glistening. "Don't let them see me weak, son." I wanted to scream, to shove that clipboard down her throat, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused. But my father, lying broken and humiliated in front of the people who once smiled at him, squeezed my hand weakly. "Let it go, please." Karen tried to regain composure. It was an accident. He shouldn't have been an accident. I snapped, my voice shaking with fury. "You ripped his brace off, you psycho." People were recording now. Someone said, "She went too far." Another whispered, "I saw the whole thing." Karen's mask cracked. She turned, shouting, "Everyone calm down." He was blocking the walkway, but her voice trembled. Her power was slipping, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Not empathy, not guilt, just fear of being exposed. The ambulance came minutes later, sirens wailing down the clean, perfect streets of Willow Creek. As they lifted my father onto the stretcher, he looked at me through the flashing red lights. "Son, don't hate her. Hate never fixes anything." I nodded, but I didn't mean it, because in that moment, watching him disappear behind those ambulance doors, something inside me broke too. Karen stood frozen as the paramedics drove off, neighbors staring in silent judgment. For once, she had no clipboard, no rule to hide behind, just trembling hands and a face that finally showed what she really was. Small, weak, and terrified. That was the day the neighborhood saw her for what she truly was. And that was the day I decided to destroy the HOA, not with anger, but with truth. Because what none of them knew was that my father had once saved Karen's family from fire. And fate has a cruel way of coming full circle. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and burnt coffee. Machines hummed softly beside my father's bed, the steady rhythm of the heart monitor cutting through the silence. He was awake, but quiet, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. His left leg was wrapped in a brace thicker than before, his right knee swollen and bruised. When I tried to speak, he stopped me with a small shake of his head. "Don't waste your anger on her, son. It's not worth it." But how could it not be worth it? That woman had humiliated him, assaulted him, and still somehow had the nerve to act like the victim. My phone was filled with clips from the picnic. People had filmed the whole thing. In every video, Karen's voice was clear, sharp, cruel, and cold. I wanted to post it to make her infamous. Yet my father refused. "No revenge," he said. "No lawsuits. Let it rest." I didn't understand his calm, not until the night that followed. The nurse had just finished checking his vitals when he called me closer. His voice was weak, but steady. "There's something you should know about Karen Monroe," he said. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." I frowned. What could you possibly know about her? He smiled faintly. "Her last name wasn't always Monroe. Back when I was still a firefighter about 15 years ago, there was a house fire on Lincoln Street. 2 adults trapped inside. A little girl, too." I froze. He continued, eyes distant. "We got there late. The flames were already climbing the second floor. I remember kicking down the front door. The father was unconscious near the hallway. I dragged him out first. Then I heard the kid screaming from upstairs. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I found her in the bedroom closet, covered in soot, crying for her mom. I carried her out through the back window, but the floor collapsed as we went. That's when I got trapped. My legs got crushed. I couldn't move. Another firefighter pulled me out, but the damage was done. I could hear my own heartbeat. Dad, that little girl," he nodded slowly. "Her name was Emily Monroe, Karen's daughter." My mouth went dry. "You saved her family." "I did what anyone would have done," he whispered. "Her husband didn't make it. But I remember seeing her outside afterward, holding that little girl, crying. She thanked me. I told her I was just glad they made it." He smiled weakly. "I didn't know she'd moved here until a few months after we settled in. She looked familiar, but I didn't recognize her at first. People change. But she knows who you are, I said. She has to. I don't think so, he murmured. I never told anyone my name that day. The news didn't mention me, just local firefighter injured in rescue. She probably never connected the dots. I sat back stunned. All that cruelty, all that hatred, and she owed him her child's life. How can you be so calm about this? I asked, my voice breaking. After everything she's done? He smiled faintly, eyes glassy. Because, son, sometimes people forget where their blessings came from. Anger can blind them. But I don't need her gratitude. I just need peace. Peace. The word stung. Because I wanted war. The next day, the HOA sent an official email, signed by Karen herself, claiming that an unfortunate accident had occurred at the picnic and that the HOA expresses deep regret. They made it sound like he tripped on his own. No apology. No accountability. Just polished lies. That was my breaking point. I stayed up that night, watching the video clips again and again. Karen's voice, her hands grabbing the brace, my father falling. Then I found it in one of the videos, her daughter Emily in the background, now grown, standing frozen in horror. The irony burned through me. I knew what I had to do. Not to hurt Karen, but to remind her of the truth she'd buried. The next day, I printed 2 photos, one of my father from 15 years ago in his firefighter uniform, and another of that old newspaper clipping about the Lincoln Street fire. I slipped them both into a plain envelope and wrote 3 words on the front. Do you remember? Then I slid it under Karen's front door. That evening, I saw her blind shift as she found it. And for the first time since we'd moved there, her house went completely dark. No porch light, no music, no laughter. She remembered. And the real story, the one she'd spent years pretending never happened, was about to come crashing back into her perfect little world. The next morning, the entire neighborhood buzzed with gossip. I could feel it in the way people looked at me as I stepped outside, curious, cautious, maybe even afraid. Karen hadn't come out of her house since last night. Her blinds were shut tight, her driveway empty. The same woman who used to march across lawns, barking orders about trash cans and lawn heights, had vanished into silence. But I wasn't done. My father thought peace would heal everything. But peace never healed wounds inflicted by humiliation. Sometimes, peace only made the abuser bolder. I opened my laptop and started compiling every shred of evidence I had, the videos, the witness statements from neighbors, even text messages from the HOA group chat where Karen joked about keeping the community clean. It wasn't just cruelty, it was corruption. She used HOA funds for personal landscaping, billed the community for private parties, and threatened anyone who questioned her with fines or property code violations. I'd seen enough of her tyranny to know that one exposed truth wouldn't be enough. I had to burn the whole system down. That night, I called a secret meeting at the community center. I messaged the people I knew had silently suffered under her, families she'd fined, retirees she'd humiliated, single moms she'd bullied for messy yards. Within an hour, 15 people showed up. When I walked in with my father's brace in my hand, the room went silent. I set it on the table and played the video, Karen's voice echoing through the small hall. If he wants to live here, he should walk like the rest of us. By the time the video ended, no one was sitting still. People were whispering, furious, disgusted. One man, a veteran named Mike, slammed his hand on the table. She did the same thing to me last year. Fine me for having a wheelchair ramp that didn't fit neighborhood aesthetics. Another woman added, she charged me $500 for a missing flower pot, and when I complained, she sent a letter threatening foreclosure. The rage in that room wasn't mine alone, it was collective. That's when I laid out my plan. I would submit all the evidence, not just to the HOA's internal committee, which Karen controlled, but directly to the state HOA, regulatory board, the local news station, and the district attorney's office. We'd go public, not anonymously, openly. Karen built her kingdom on fear, I said. But what happens when the people she ruled stop being afraid? The next few days were chaos. The local reporter, a sharp young woman named Lisa from Channel 7, picked up the story after seeing the footage. A disabled veteran assaulted at a community event by HOA president. The headline alone was enough to make the story viral. By morning, the video had hit every social platform, TikTok, X, Facebook, and the comment section was exploding with outrage. How could someone do that to a man in leg braces? She should be in jail. That firefighter deserves justice. The pressure mounted fast. HOA members began resigning one by one. Karen's closest allies, her so-called Board of Integrity, suddenly claimed they had no idea about her actions. But the documents I leaked told a different story. Signatures approving every shady expenditure, every manipulated fine, every rigged vote. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen finally broke her silence. She posted a trembling video on the HOA's Facebook page, her face pale and tired. She tried to paint herself as the victim, said the video was misinterpreted, that my father instigated the incident. But then she stopped mid-sentence when someone commented under the live stream. Was that before or after he saved your daughter from the Lincoln Street fire? Her face drained of color. The comment section erupted. People demanded answers, screenshots of the old newspaper clippings spreading like wildfire. In minutes, her carefully built image, the perfect suburban leader, the self-righteous enforcer, collapsed under the weight of her own history. And while the internet did its part, I focused on something far more personal. I took my father for a walk, his first since the incident, down to the park where it all started. The autumn leaves crunched under our feet. He still moved slowly, leaning on his cane, but his spirit was stronger than ever. "Did you do this?" he asked quietly, a knowing glint in his eyes. "I just told the truth," I said. He smiled sadly. "Truth can be its own fire, son. Once it burns, there's no going back." I didn't regret it. Not for a second. 2 days later, Karen was officially removed as HOA president. The board dissolved under investigation, and a temporary committee was appointed by the county to manage finances. Charges were filed: assault, fraud, embezzlement. And for the first time since we'd moved there, the neighborhood felt alive. Kids playing without fear. Neighbors waving again. The air lighter, freer. But the story didn't end there. A week after the charges were filed, we received a letter. It wasn't official, just a plain white envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a single piece of paper, handwritten in neat cursive. I remember. "I'm sorry." No signature, but I knew the handwriting. Karen had finally remembered the man who saved her child and realized the monster she'd become. I folded the letter and handed it to my father. He read it quietly, then smiled. "Now," he said softly, "we can have peace." But I knew the internet wasn't done with her. The story had gone viral, and people were demanding justice. She couldn't hide anymore. And just when I thought everything was over, the biggest twist of all arrived, one that no one saw coming. It was a bright Saturday morning when everything finally came crashing down, not just for Karen, but for the entire HOA that had tormented our neighborhood for years. Channel 7's van parked outside the community gate at exactly 9 a.m. A camera crew, reporters, and even a few curious neighbors gathered around. Word had spread like wildfire. The county had ordered a full public audit of the HOA's finances, and all current and former board members were required to attend. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid to show up. They came in droves, retirees, families, kids holding handmade signs that read "Justice for Mr. Thompson" and "HOA equals Heartless Organization of America." I stood beside my father near the community center, his hands gripping his cane, his leg brace shining in the sunlight. He was quiet, but his eyes were alive, watching as the empire that had broken him began to crumble in front of everyone. When Karen finally arrived, she looked nothing like the woman we once feared. Her signature power stance was gone. The bold lipstick, the designer sunglasses, the sharp tone, all replaced by a trembling woman clutching a stack of papers and wearing oversized shades to hide her tears. The county investigator began the proceedings. We've reviewed financial records, public complaints, and video evidence submitted by multiple residents, he said, his voice echoing across the crowd. What we found is not only unethical, but criminal. He listed it: All the embezzlement, the falsified fines, intimidation tactics, each accusation hit like a hammer. Karen tried to speak, but every word she uttered was drowned out by murmurs and gasps. Finally, the investigator played the video, the same one the world had seen. Karen ripping my father's brace, laughing as he fell, my mother screaming. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the birds seemed to stop. Then, from the back of the crowd, a familiar voice cut through. "Do you remember me, Mrs. Monroe?" Everyone turned. Standing near the fence was a young woman, mid-20s, blonde, blue eyes. She looked nervous but determined. Karen froze. "Emily," she whispered. "Her daughter." Emily stepped forward, holding up an old photograph, one of her as a child, covered in soot, being carried out of a burning house by a firefighter. "My father." "I didn't believe it at first," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But when I saw the old news clipping, I remembered his face. He saved me. He saved you, Mom. And this is how you repay him." Karen's lips parted, but no words came out. Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks as she turned toward my father. "I'm so sorry for what she did to you. I don't know what happened to her heart, but you didn't deserve this." The crowd erupted, people clapping, cheering, some crying. My father, humbled and teary-eyed, nodded gently. "You don't owe me an apology, sweetheart. You were just a little girl then. I'm glad you remember." Even Karen began to cry, her face collapsing under the weight of guilt that had finally caught up with her. She fell to her knees right there in front of everyone. I lost everything that day," she said between sobs. "My husband, my home, and maybe my soul too. I thought being in control would make me safe again. I was wrong." The investigator didn't intervene. He just let the moment breathe. Everyone there knew this was more than justice. It was reckoning. As she was escorted away by officers charged officially with assault, fraud, and financial misconduct, Karen turned back once, locking eyes with my father. No hatred, no defiance, just remorse. "I remember," she mouthed. My father sighed, almost in relief. "Then, maybe," he whispered, "that's enough." The crowd broke into applause. People hugged, neighbors smiled, and for the first time, it felt like the weight of years of fear had lifted. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the community center lights glowed with a softer, warmer hue. Residents gathered again, this time not for confrontation, but for rebirth. They voted to dissolve the HOA permanently. The motion passed unanimously. The bylaws that had once bound us with fear were shredded, the documents burned in a small metal bin outside. My father watched the flames flicker, the same kind of fire that once took his strength, now giving it back. When it was over, the newscaster approached him for a comment. "Mr. Thompson," she said, "after everything you've been through, what message do you want to give to people watching?" He smiled gently, his voice steady despite the years of pain. "Don't let bitterness become your purpose," he said. "Even when people hurt you, don't let them steal your heart. Justice isn't revenge, it's truth, revealed in its own time. And sometimes, truth just needs a little spark to burn through the darkness." The reporter paused, visibly moved. "And what about forgiveness?" He looked out at the neighborhood. Children laughing again, people rebuilding what fear had broken. "Forgiveness doesn't erase the past," he said, "but it makes room for the future." The camera captured that final moment, the humble man who'd lost his legs to a fire, yet somehow became the spark that reignited his entire community. That clip went viral overnight. Millions watched, commented, and shared his words. The video's final frame, my father's calm smile, the sunset behind him, stayed on the screen as the reporter's voice faded. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they just wear braces. A few months passed after the HOA's collapse, and life in the neighborhood slowly began to feel human again. The air no longer carried that edge of tension, that invisible fear of Karen's constant surveillance. The lawns were still green, the mailboxes still uniform, but something deeper had changed, the people. They talked to each other again, helped each other, laughed in driveways that had once been silent battlegrounds. And in the middle of it all was my father. He'd become something of a local hero, Not just because of what he'd endured, but because of how he responded to it. He didn't brag, didn't gloat, didn't even mention Karen's name again. Instead, he focused on small things, fixing broken fences, helping kids learn about fire safety, teaching neighbors how to install smoke detectors. To him, life wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding. One evening, I found him sitting on the porch, the golden light of sunset spilling across his worn hands. The same hands that had once pulled a little girl from a burning house. I sat beside him. "You ever think about her?" I asked. He didn't need clarification. "Karen." He nodded slowly. "Sometimes, but not with anger anymore. You see, son, she was already burning long before that day at the park. Her fire wasn't made of flames, it was guilt. And guilt, if you don't face it, consumes everything." His words lingered in the air like smoke. "She tried to control everything," he continued, "because she couldn't control what hurt her. That's the tragedy of people like her. They punish the world for their own pain." I looked out at the neighborhood, kids chasing fireflies, an old couple planting flowers near the sidewalk, the smell of barbecue floating in the air. "You really forgive her?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Forgiveness isn't about her. It's about me. It's about not letting her poison take up space in my heart." That night, I finally understood something he'd been trying to teach me all along, that strength isn't found in how loud you fight back, but in how quietly you stand tall after you've been knocked down. A few weeks later, Channel 7 aired a follow-up story, The Neighborhood That Chose Compassion Over Control. It featured clips of neighbors rebuilding the park, restoring the community center, and planting a small tree near the playground, a memorial for what was lost and a promise of what was to come. At the base of that tree, they placed a small metal plaque that read, "To those who were broken but chose to heal anyway." My father refused to make a speech at the dedication, but the reporter convinced him to say a few words. He stood before the crowd. No script, no notes, just a man with scars deeper than anyone could see. "Life will always have its Karens," he said softly, a faint smile on his lips. "People who try to control, to shame, to hurt. But if you let their hate define you, you become what they are. And if you choose to rise, to forgive, and to keep doing good anyway, that's how you win. That's how you break the chain." The crowd erupted in applause. I saw neighbors wiping their eyes. Even Emily, Karen's daughter, stood quietly in the back, tears streaming down her cheeks. She later joined our neighborhood's new community board, dedicated to kindness, inclusion, and accessibility for everyone. As the sun dipped low and the last of the day's light painted the sky orange, I realized something powerful. Our story had stopped being just ours. It had become a message. People from across the country sent letters, emails, and videos after watching the viral report. Disabled veterans, single parents, bullied teens, all saying the same thing. "Your story gave me hope." Hope. That was the real ending. Not the downfall of a cruel woman, not the collapse of a corrupt HOA, but the quiet victory of hope over hatred. Later that night, as I uploaded the final video to my channel, I titled it simply, "The Fire That Healed Us." In the last frame, I included my father's voice, calm, weathered, and full of grace. "No matter what they take from you, your pride, your peace, your strength, never let them take your heart. Because the heart is where every fire begins." The comments flooded in within hours, people sharing their own stories of survival, justice, and forgiveness. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I didn't feel anger or sadness or revenge. I felt peace. And maybe, just maybe, that's what my father meant all along, that sometimes the fire that tried to destroy you ends up lighting the way for thousands of others. If this story moved you, if you believe in standing up against cruelty and choosing compassion over hate, hit subscribe right now. Because on this channel, every story reminds us that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about healing. See you in the next one.